Welcome to Email After Hours by SenderScore, powered by Validity.
We're your hosts. My name is Guy Hansen.
And I'm Danielle Gallant, and this is Email After Hours. Listeners, today we are getting back to our roots and our passion, which is, of course, email deliverability. In this episode, we'll dive into practical strategies that really help bridge the gap between best practices, which Guy and I love to preach, and real-world applications. We're going to talk about quick wins that can make all the difference, especially during high-stakes periods like the holidays. And of course, not an episode can go by where we don't discuss the impact of industry shifts like Gmail and Yahoo's requirements to Apple's MPP and now iOS 18. So we're going to talk about how to prepare your email program to be resilient in an evolving ecosystem.
Joining us today is Udeme Ukutt, a seasoned expert with more than 2 decades of email deliverability experience, which is amazing. That's more than me. And over the years, he's worked with both Return Path and Validity, hands-on experience, which has helped brands navigate complex challenges, from the nuances of balancing volume spikes with deliverability health to the essential steps for future-proofing your email strategy. Udeme's insights are rooted in real-world success stories that will inspire and empower your email marketing games. That's what we're going to be talking about today. Welcome to the show. It's so great to have you join myself and Danielle on Email After Hours today.
Thank you. And it's a pleasure to join this. I've followed it for quite a while and enjoyed it with all the popcorn in the house. So it's fun to be on the other side this time.
I love that. Well, actually, you've kind of preempted my icebreaker question, which is what we always kick off the show with a food reference. Demi said you're a seasoned expert. So let's break the ice with a seasoning question. How do you like your steak?
Most times pretty well done with a little pink. In terms of heat level, I will tell you, punch it like the muscle in my right arm. But depending on the restaurant, I would say maybe 1 or 2 levels down so it doesn't hurt later. But yep, that's how I like to roll.
Is that how you like your email marketing as well? You know, when it's really well done and there's a bit of sizzle going on there? We're going to have to move on to email. My stomach's rumbling already.
Seriously.
No, listen, like us, you've worked on email deliverability with a broad range of businesses, from large corporations to smaller enterprises. If you think back on your life in email, do you think there's ever been like a really surprising lesson or unconventional insight in the course of all the stuff you've learned about deliverability?
Yes, one that comes to mind is be prepared for the unknown. I think I shared jokingly a little while ago, I can't remember yesterday or the last time we chatted or today, but I also do some sports-related officiating on the side. And that's given a pretty similar picture to email where be prepared for anything. But one line we like to joke about on the professional tennis tour, which now you know the secret. Treat the preseason like the Super Bowl. So not to get crazy with NFL, football, and American football now, but in terms of email, same thing. Treat the normal non-holiday season like a holiday season. It's pretty easy to get excited and reminded about the holidays, and in the United States, Black Friday, Cyber Monday. But think about it in terms of the Yahoo thing Danielle said a minute ago. Same thing that the ISPs have talked about for years. And now it's, we're requiring it, and there's X% of folks freaking out. It's really nothing different. It's the same thing that's been preached about for a while.
But right now, as we record this episode, we are, we're almost at American Thanksgiving, but it feels like, in the email world anyway, we are right in the middle of holiday season. And we're going to talk more about the holidays a little later, but let's just address a harsh truth that you're kind of referring to here about email in 2024 versus email in 2004. The entire marketing calendar has just ballooned. Like way back when there wasn't a Blue Monday or a Singles Day, it seems like every day is now a holiday of some kind. And I was reading, is this true that Prime Day only started in 2015? It just feels like it's always been there. So how do you find that email marketers have adapted to this like ever expanding calendar? Like, how do brands decide which holidays they should focus on, and how do you build a calendar around that?
From my experience, because I've not worked with all the brands on the planet, but one thing is having, I like to call it antennas, like a radio, the old school radio or TV, the square box with two things. You have to do the hokey pokey dance to get a good service.
I
But
remember that.
that's one way to actually think about how your brand could keep a tab on things. Of you can have the professionals in house.
Absolutely. And I think Danielle framed that question in terms of how the marketing calendar has changed over the years. And of course, the sending landscape's changed almost beyond recognition as well. You think just recently we've been coping with Apple's MPP and now the challenges from their latest iOS 18 release and Gmail and Yahoo's bulk sender requirements and more to come. And as we were prepping for today, you came across loud and clear about the value of future-proofing email programs to stay ahead of these evolving challenges. Get ready today so it's not a huge surprise tomorrow. So do you have any thoughts in terms of what's the best way for email programs to future-proof themselves against what's just around the corner in terms of the next big development and how email marketers need to bake some resilience into their email strategy?
One good one, since you referenced MPP and Google's recent requirements, I think were announced about last October, so just about 13 months ago. That goes back to the new car analogy, but it makes sure everything like the tires are pumped, there's no screaming lights on the dashboard. So in terms of email, there's going to be times where a brand may have to open up a new vertical. So just make sure your IPs and domains are set up properly with the appropriate DNS records, RDNS and all that, feedback loops. They seem like pretty small things, but let's say I have an RDNS that, let's say an IP resolves to 123.udemesmonkeyhead.com. That's kind of a wacky host name versus mail.emailprogram.com. It looks more human to an MTA, little things like that. Just like that's the common sense piece of, and then, creatives, test it before you send it out. To Danielle's point about calendars and stuff, don't just wait for the big, crazy holiday season to send mail because one, the recipient filters don't recognize or may not even want to accept mail from a brand new domain. So there's folks that will look for newly observed domains and put it in a holding pattern just to play safe to protect their users. So the earlier I would start to warm up something new, the better. It doesn't have to be the week before this week. It could have started in the summer. If it's an email a day, email a month, it's just simple. Try to keep it simple. Don't overthink it. But the earlier you plan ahead and set up things with the warm-up pattern, the better. Whatever it is, content, infrastructure, anything. So yeah, that's one idea I would throw out there.
Lots of very solid advice there. And of course, this being the time of year that it is, we're starting to get out our crystal balls. We're starting to think about what's going to be coming along in the next 12 months or so. Do you feel there's a trend you've been observing at the moment, which is going to be crucial in shaping deliverability in 2025?
The one answer I could give to that is I don't know what tomorrow will be, but obviously there's a trend of a couple of years ago, for example, DMARC was, and now DMARC picked up heat about a year ago. Google and Yahoo said, well, you know what? We're not just saying turn on DMARC, but have something in the DMARC record that tells us, oh, we actually put eyeballs on something. It's not just P equals blank, P equals something. Just have it look something somewhat reasonable. But to answer your question, yes, there's a good chance. I feel that things will get a little bit more tighter and tighter as the days and weeks and months roll ahead. I don't know specifically what, but we know that it's, the Yahoo
I
goals.
betcha part of it is going to be DMARC. I betcha part
it's
of it is
almost
going to
like
be
you were
DMARC.
listening to last week's State of Email.
And I think that's one of those, it's almost one of those basics that you were talking about, right? We have to focus on authentication, but authentication is going to shift and change. So I just mentioned we together were on a State of Email webinar just last week, I think. What is time anymore?
Yep.
And Marcel from Yahoo told us that there's been a 70% increase in DMARC adoption since they announced that it was going to be a requirement. And it's odd to think that an authentication protocol that's been around for a long time needed to become a requirement for senders to implement it. But still, though, most senders have a passive P equals none DMARC policy instead of an enforcement policy. And just as a recap for everybody, if you have a P equals none policy, it basically just means you're getting the reports. It doesn't actually mean your domain is protected to any greater degree. So in your opinion, why do you think marketers are reluctant to go to an enforcement policy that better secures their program? Is it like an education gap, just trying to meet the bare minimum? Like, what are your thoughts on why we don't see more enforcement?
It's a mix. It's like a big, ugly, messy pie that wasn't baked well. Part of,
Back to food.
part of it is some folks that control DNS just went to Google and Googled something and grabbed one of the result that their gut felt was the right one and implemented P equals none. You could, like, I remember even this morning I saw one with a passive DMARC policy of P equals none with an IRA address going to admin@admin.com. And I'm here going,
Helpful. That's helpful.
So, yep. So, one, that's a wacky address to send RUA data to. Two, like you said, that's basically not doing much. So, there's also the part where understanding is a problem. There's a balance between folks that want to do it and one, the parties don't understand, or part of the folks don't have authority to do it. So I can think of one or two past jobs where I can't just go into production and make a DNS change. It has to go through a couple of hoops. One, to protect error. Two, to prevent taking the site down. So roadblocks. And let's say the last approval is out this week because it's the US Thanksgiving week. Pretty quiet. That's going to sit there for a week or two. And maybe if I don't have enough tracking, I'll forget it. So, and then the other part is just not understanding what it means. And even when you try to explain using analogies, anyone you want to think of, or even point to your documentation or a couple of others, it's going in, it's going out. So it kind of stinks, but it is what it is. So we'll just keep trying to push. So, yeah.
Which is a shame and a missed opportunity all rolled into one, because one of the things that implementing a stronger version of DMARC enables is that senders can then implement BIMI. So for anyone that hasn't listened to the last 40 episodes of Email After Hours, BIMI, brand indicators for message identification, is basically, think of it as an extension of DMARC, which enables you to display your approved corporate logo next to your email in the inbox. And to us, it just seems like really low-hanging fruit. It's a great way to stand out in crowded inboxes. So what practical advice would you give to our listeners who are maybe thinking about putting BIMI in place, but concerned about the complexities? And do you think there's an argument that putting it in place might help them improve their deliverability as well because of the increased subscriber engagement that it might engender?
Yes, it has a very clear benefit. One is BIMI is me basically trying to woo you, like taking my wife to dinner. I'm trying to decide where to go for dinner. And I'm going, it's your favorite food. Let's go. But to get to dinner, which is DMARC, you need BIMI first. So to flip it over to your point, it's a low-hanging fruit. It's a nice way that I've shared in the past to a few folks of saying, hey, you see that cool, pretty logo for airline X or brand Y? You do know that it took a strong DMARC policy to get that cute logo. Then they go, oh, I said, yes, it's not that scary. And sometimes I'll pretend I'm the dumb person in the room and say, hey, you don't have to listen to me, look at ABC article, but it's all what we love and do for email. In terms of inbox rate uptick, yes, I can see the advantage for that, but I've also explained that the dinner analogy that I use, sometimes people will say, well, so it's going to guarantee me inbox rate. And I'll say, no, it won't guarantee it. It's a low-hanging fruit to guide you there because if you have a better authentication policy, you flip that over to ISPs, love seeing a better authentication policy for SPF, DKIM, and then, of course, DMARC. The chances of better inbox deliverability, yes. So it's all like a package deal. It's not just, oh, BIMI on, DMARC on, inbox, yes. It's all...
I love the idea that BIMI is like the equivalent of your email program putting like makeup on or something to go out. Like it's dressing it up, right? It's a reward essentially.
Yep. And I'm not kidding. I've used that in a few executive meetings saying, like, we all know about Google annotations and all that. Yes. But I said, literally, it's like putting on makeup on your email brand. It looks prettier, but you can put on whatever color lipstick you want. All that matters is that you have lipstick. BIMI, DMARC. Oh, it's passing. It's failing less. Everybody wins.
Relatable. We've got pie analogies, car analogies, makeup analogies. We're on a roll. But before we leave the BIMI front, one thing that does actually, I think, or has maybe inhibited the usage of BIMI is that in order, or at least historically, in order for that logo to display at Gmail, which at least in North America and a lot of the Western world represents a huge percentage of a subscribers list, you need to pay for something, which is called a verified mark certificate, a VMC, and go through, frankly, some like decent legal hoops where you have to prove you've legally trademarked the logo, et cetera. So just to throw this out there, there's officially one less excuse for marketers who haven't done this yet. There is a new option, another acronym, maybe, oh my gosh, maybe a brand new one that we haven't mentioned on the podcast yet, which is a CMC. So you can think of this as like, I don't know, a VMC's little sister. It stands for a common mark certificate. So it's essentially what a VMC does. It allows that BIMI logo to display at Google, Gmail, but you don't have to go through the legal trademarking verification process, which I think really has been a huge hurdle.
I could see the one challenge that I've heard about, and not just not a CMC thing, a VMC. It's the good thing is that it's a little cheaper than a VMC, a verified mark certificate. The challenge I've seen and heard a few folks is mostly the small, tiny coffee shop people where, oh, I love the idea, but I can't cough out. I think VMC is closer to $1,700 a month, a year. And then CMC is closer to $1,000, but they still go, oh, $1,000. I'm a small business. So to your point, it's cheaper, but less hurdles, fewer hurdles. But yep, I could still see that it's a challenge, but you can't put a price on everything, right? So
you're right. And I think small businesses do often face email challenges that really bigger retail brands just don't, whether that's because of budget or because there's just more data available to bigger senders. And I think that's kind of a good segue into really when we have to think about real world constraints, right? So like email experts, we're always stressing that senders should follow best practices to optimize performance. I'm always nitpicking, but those real world constraints often require a pragmatic approach, right? So sometimes you can't follow every single best practice to the letter. You have to make that fit for your program. So do you have any examples where you either advised a brand or witnessed a brand taking maybe an unconventional but practical approach to deliverability that maybe performed just as well as sticking to those textbook strategies?
I've seen a couple that they were just lucky. They were doing things right. They didn't know a couple of deliverability specifics, but they had a good cadence. They didn't send too many emails a day. I think a couple would send maybe like once or twice a week. Depending on the geolocation, they would, balance that out. So it's not a little too much overkill, but they were just fine. No authentication. And when I bumped into that, I said, oh, interesting. You didn't know you're driving with flat tires. And you're lucky so far, but it's never too late to improve what works versus using the terminology of, oh, we need to fix this. I always say, oh, let's improve what's working. And the buy-in is a lot more easier to get through and set things up. Another thing, not just for challenging senders, but in general, I've done in the past is you can't fix something in 2 seconds. If it's going to take you 2 weeks, just have it in mind. It's 2 weeks. Have a plan. Flick each switch on day 1, day 3. Don't need rush to blow through everything at once because you just break the roof. And it's helped to put things on a whiteboard and see that where it's, oh, I don't have to do everything. I don't have to implement all the authentication protocols in 10 minutes. I can do it on a Friday or Saturday morning, lesser mail traffic.
Don't do it on a Friday, Udeme. Are you kidding me? That's like my greatest nightmare when I My clients are like, we're making this authentication change on a Friday.
I did that on purpose. Yep, that's a good point. So don't do any changes on a Friday, no matter what the reason is, no matter what. Just no, don't. Don't. If you're going to do it on a Monday, don't do it Monday morning. Maybe afternoon, people are around, people come in different times. Like that's the common sense piece and by the book piece. Just, yeah. So, yeah, I rambled a little bit, but I think I got your question as well. That we're
Yeah,
chatting about.
definitely. And a
Yeah.
slight segue, because I think when we have these conversations, we often end up talking about best practices and good standards for the high volume programs, which are typically B2C. And Danielle and I will both have been on webinars in previous months where you see that little plaintive hand raise going, we're a B2B sender. You guys got anything for us? And it's right, because they do have common elements with B2C programs, but also differences. They're often working with really small teams. They've got more limited resources. What have you found to be the sort of biggest deliverability challenges specifically for B2B senders? And have you got any quick wins that you would recommend for them?
It sounds pretty vague, but study your data, understand your data, look at trends. So there are sometimes, I think I've encountered a few where they just send mail on the fly, no monitoring, no tracking, no pattern reviews, nothing. No metrics tracking, just send email, done. Where, for example, they could be resending to invalid users, they won't know. They could be using Outlook, doing the whole 2, 3, 400 BCC, CC thing. Yep, just freestyle. Woo! But that goes back to the segue a couple of minutes ago where I think Danielle was talking about budget constraints, headcount constraints, B2B, maybe smaller company, lesser resources. So yep, those are just a few I could think of right away. But yeah.
I think it's harder all around, right? Because especially if you have a smaller budget, fewer emails to send, you might not be investing in that tracking, but also there are just deliverability risks that are kind of inherent with that. Like perhaps there's shared IPs being used or even shared domains. Some ESPs will do that. So yeah, it's a bit of a delicate balance. And I know that both B2B and B2C brands are feeling the pain that at least some of my clients are feeling right now. We talked about before, we are right about to hit Black Friday, Cyber Monday. And it used to be that email marketers kind of did like a batch and blast strategy for peak sales events, right? Grab everybody in your universe and send them an email. But the deliverability game has become more nuanced. Still, the holiday season is notorious for volume spikes. And it's a time of year that always seems to push marketers to abandon like best practices, kind of in favor of just meeting revenue goals. Well, I think too, like I had a call with a client last week that was like, so what are the risks if we just mail 4 times a day for the next couple of weeks? Like whether we're talking about ink or Guy has a wonderful that he stole, I think, from Jay Schwanelson, a previous guest, which is toilet seat spam. Or is that right? Where you get, was it toilet seat Guy? Where you just get like a toilet seat promoted to you after you buy one, like someone you. But I think that frequency, no matter what, can really become a deliverability problem. Frequency and relevancy during the holidays, you're right, I think are just things that people tend to let go of and forget.
And I can understand, and I understand that it's a holiday, no matter what the holiday is across the globe. Your average brand or market is going to want to send X% more mail. Fine, I get it. But just don't abuse it. So,
do you think that's something that senders should spend more attention to, in that sort of post-holiday period? It's all very well sort of analyzing the sort of opens and the clicks, but those less sexy metrics like the complaints, the opt-out rates, etc., and, the sort of potential negative impacts that they've had on their program because of that big surge in volume?
Yes, that's a great idea. But also, if I sent campaigns to a list I've not touched in 10 years, I would treat it differently than a list that I've sent to in the last 6 months.
Yeah, only
I would
send
treat
them
it
20
differently.
toilet seat emails.
Yeah.
Precisely.
So, yep. I mean, we three know that if we're hitting whatever type of trap list, for example, whether it's pristine, recycled, a spam trap's a spam trap, versus they've not probably engaged in about 1 year, 1 day, something like that. So I would go, yep, that's a good comparison where just there's no reason I should be sending email to someone that has not opened or done any activity in the last 5 years, for example.
I do love the idea, though, that like, especially for people who maybe aren't directly involved in the marketing, so the calendar deploying it, but like higher ups, maybe where you explain, like you're cheersing, you've got the sales, you've got the conversions, and then you completely tuck away any negative subscriber sentiment, like spam complaints. Okay, now our deliverability is not doing great, like spam traps. I think it's good advice to broaden the data metric horizon that you look at after the holidays.
Yep. I think on and off in the last couple of years, I've gotten lucky or unlucky to be in front of executives. And I remember my first boss told me, it's just a person, just stick to the facts, no opinions, and just explain the risks. That's all you can do. And it's up to them to buy in. But it's a hard one because if a decision maker doesn't, quote unquote, take the advice, then the data will speak for itself afterwards. And then it's, oh no. So it's hard because I don't want to lose my job either. I have to.
We like to think the data is objective, right? Because it's black and white, but the story that you can spin with that data is completely up to you, right?
Yep.
So yeah, it's a real challenge. And it's not just the holidays, right? I think it's fair to say that the priority for most marketers is conversions when it comes to email, period. But like over time, we've seen that emails really do need to become hyper-personalized to the point that brands need to be sensitive to global happenings, period, right? Like individual subscriber needs need to be balanced with an appropriate tone. So there was just a very small election in the US. Nothing noteworthy. But I mean, I had lots of clients asking, how should we shift our strategy? What should our cadence be around the US election? So when it comes to strategies that you might recommend for marketers to like maintain that strong engagement, but being sensitive to social and political contexts, what does that look like? What does that balance look like for you?
Think like the recipients, not to replicate what I said before, but this time put into consideration where people live, who the audience is in terms of your typical demographics. I'm not going to send the same email I would send to the three of us to my neighbor who's almost 90. The tone of the content, to your point, the small election season we just had in the US. So election day, I would probably want to tone down, let's say, what was that? Super Tuesday, I think is the word. Yep. So if I could play around with the calendar set up to maybe push it out to, or send it before the election, maybe Monday, just because there's going to be happy and grumpy people the day after the election, little things like that. Think like the recipient that will get it, where they live. So the stuff that I would send to folks in the United States would probably be different from folks in Canada. They didn't have elections. They cared about the US elections, but they're not American. Guy speaks English, but he's in Europe. So I don't have to grab my entire English demographic audience and blast the same thing. I would have to consider, guys across the ocean, I have to respect his feelings. And what you and I will get, Danielle, will be different than what Guy will get. So, because that would in turn flip around and affect deliverability rates as well.
That's right. And I want you to use S's, not Z's.
Aha. Yep. Or like little words like labor, LOUR.
There's always a U that deserves to be in all of those. As the Canadian, I vouch. I'm with you, Guy, on the U's.
You're Canadian?
I am your resident Canadian. But I think that for sure that the calendar needs to be adjusted, making sure that you're putting yourself in the perspective or being able to empathize with your subscribers. Let's avoid any emotionally charged language, maybe. Really.
Yep, but funny you said that because I didn't want to interrupt the both of you, but respect your audience. It sounds cheeky, but the three of us are great friends. But I won't cross the line when it gets to humor. Flip that over to the email program. Respect your audience, because you'd be surprised how one or two recipients could change an email program. Bad news travels way quicker than good news. So, yeah.
That's absolutely right. This has been such a good conversation. And I think, for us, one of the attractions of talking to you today was just the sheer amount of experience that you bring to the conversation. And I think you've definitely shared a load of that with us and our audience today. We do need to start wrapping up. And I think on a similar theme, as we said at the start, you've been in the world of email like ourselves for years. Hopefully you'll take it as a compliment if I say, I think, you're seen as one of the elder statesmen like me. Danielle's still younger. But,
how long am I going to get away with that?
as long as I'm on this show. But seriously, I think part of our role is to help contribute and educate the industry as a whole. So as we're having those conversations sort of next year with some of the sort of newer starters in our industry, what do you think we're going to be talking to them about in terms of perhaps the next big challenge?
That's an interesting big one. So one thing I learned from working in different pieces of the ecosystem, last analogy maybe. So I told a new neighbor we had that I'm like an octopus in the email world. He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "I've worked at a few senders, a few receivers. I've also worked at brands, but it's all about email. Whether it's send, receive, I respect the email ecosystem and learn, make mistakes, talk to people like you both, and just keep learning, keep an ear to the ground. But there's always something new that could be on the horizon. I mean, we're talking about authentication for years, and now it's a requirement. A lot of folks have hounded and talked about this a lot, but your podcast is a pretty punchy phrase tagline, after hours. So I think about email after hours as well, if it helps. Funny story that both of you do not know, but the day after I got married, I got a phone call about a block at a past job. And us typical email geeks, we always drag our MacBook or computer along anywhere we go. And I got the look like, "Where are you packing your computer to?" I go, "I don't know. It's just part of my pick your wallet, pick your keys out the door type thing. Manja." I kid you not. Around 10 the following, I thought my boss was going to say, "Oh, congratulations on your honeymoon. Enjoy. Oh, by the way," I go, "We had a block issue. I'm
Never
still wearing
a dull
a ring."
moment.
So, yep, that's the part of what we've talked about of anything can happen. Be prepared. But don't drag your computer to bed. Yeah, as well. So,
And Debbie, thank you so much for sharing your valuable insights and of course, your expertise in email with us today. For listeners who might be interested in connecting with you or learning more about your work, what's the best way that they can reach you?
I am on LinkedIn. Yes, I used to work there, but I actually use it as well. My name is pretty unique. There's not a lot of, I don't know, Joe, John. Udeme is pretty unique, so I shouldn't be hard to find, but I'd appreciate anybody reaching out, saying hello, reach out to Danielle or Guy. I'm just a normal guy that's a tennis referee that loves deliverability and email. So
He's going to give you some sweet email analogies if you ask for them.
That's right. And one final word. I mean, we love our guests that join us on Email After Hours. We're always looking out for new folk who want to feature on future episodes too. So if you'd like to join us on an upcoming episode, drop us a comment, ping us on LinkedIn, or you can even fill out the guest form linked in the show notes. We'd love to have a chat about getting you to join us for a future episode. Thanks for listening. We'll see you guys next time in another 2 weeks. Bye for now.
Bye.
bye for now.
Be sure to tune in next time and hit subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. And don't forget to visit senderscore.com for loads more great resources to help you become a stronger sender.
To all you sleepless senders out there, thank you for joining us after hours and see you next time.